Du même endroit.
I can hear you, Jerry, but I get nothing on the night.
In Kigali, she wakes up, she picks out chores. In Hanoi, Natal, Ramallah, in Tangier, she takes a breath, lifts up her voice. In Lahore, La Paz, Kampala, though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we are one woman, you cry and I hear you. We are one woman, you hurt and I hurt too. We are one woman, your hopes are mine, and we shall shine. In Wallace, she speaks the truth. She reaches out, then teaches others how to. In Jaipur, she gives her name. She leaves without shame. In Manila, Sultan, though we're different as can be, we're connected, she with me. We are one woman, your courage keeps me strong. We are one woman, you sing, I sing along. We are one woman, your dreams are mine, and we shall shine. We shall shine.
And one man he hears her voice, one man he fights her fight. Day by day he lets go the old ways, one woman at a time.
Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we are one woman, your victory sings a song. We are one woman, you rise and I stand tall. We are one woman, your world is mine, and we shall shine. Shine, shine, shine. We shall shine. Shine, shine, shine. We shall shine. Shine, shine, shine.
Welcome to the commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women.
Welcome to the commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. My name is Zara El-Hilali.
And I'm Stuart Moyer. Together with UN Women and UNFPA, we are your co-hosts for this event today, and I'm coming to you from London.
And I'm coming to you from Perth, Australia, standing on the Indigenous Noongar Boodja land. Warm welcomes again to all of you who are joining us across the world. Stuart, wonderful to co-host with you. I know you are deeply involved as a peace-building activist in the former Soviet space.
And the same for me, Zara. So pleased to be co-hosting with you, especially as you're representing Australian youth on the Gender Equality Task Force of UN Women. We're all gathered in this virtual space today to mark the 25th of November, International Day to eliminate violence against women, and the beginning of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. 16 days, as we usually refer to it, is an international campaign which takes place every year from the 25th of November, International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, to the 10th of December, Human Rights Day. It was originated by activists at the first Women's Global Leadership Institute in 1991 and is coordinated each year by the Center for Women's Global Leadership. It is used as a strategy around the world to call for an end to violence against women and girls.
In support of this civil society initiative, each year, the United Nations Secretary-General's campaign, Unite to End Violence Against Women, calls for global action to increase worldwide awareness and create opportunities for discussions about challenges and solutions. As you see, Stuart and I are wearing a touch of orange today, and many of you probably already know that the Unite campaign has utilised the colour orange as a unifying theme running through all of its activities. Orange is a symbol of a brighter future free from violence against women and girls.
Today's event is taking place under the umbrella of the Secretary-General's Unite campaign. Shortly, we will have the honor of hearing from the Secretary-General himself, a number of heads of states and high-level officials from around the world, UN Women Goodwill Ambassadors Nicole Kidman from Australia and Sydney Bishop from Thailand, and a number of Goodwill Ambassadors from the Arab states region. We will hear from Nobel Peace Prize laureate Nadia Murad and many other remarkable individuals and global activists who are working tirelessly to make a difference in the lives of women and girls.
In April this year, UN Women reported that 249 million women and girls aged 15 to 49 had experienced sexual or physical violence by an intimate partner in the previous 12 months. Violence against women and girls is pervasive during normal times. It is a product of unequal gender power relations and discrimination against women and girls.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19, emerging data have shown that violence against women and girls is unfortunately on the rise. Let's hear about the situation firsthand from a few extraordinary grassroots leaders who are working on the ground daily to make a difference in the lives of survivors in the midst of COVID-19.
During COVID-19 pandemic, we took over the role of first-line responders and mediators between women victims of violence and institutions in the system of protection from violence.
We are first responders even in conflict situations, standing at the forefront, supporting women and girls facing complex challenges during COVID-19 confinement.
During the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, UNAB provided phone call-based psychosocial support to girls and women with disabilities victims of violence to ensure their safety, referral, and access to support services during the lockdown.
Women for Afghan Women Organization provided hundreds of women and children of incarcerated mothers with shelter, legal services, counseling, health services.
We provided emergency funding. We paid rent and utilities for some of our beneficiaries. We organized online trainings and workshops on psychological resilience and well-being. And we also supported small businesses run by women and affected by COVID-19.
International Aid has supported local organizations, Kamfuri and Farodis, to maintain their centers for vulnerable women and girls, including those with disability and survivors of domestic violence, to access free shelter, legal and psychological support.
Durante la pandemia por COVID-19, desde Andes, focalizamos nuestro trabajo monitoreando las respuestas del Estado a la hora de transversalizar las perspectivas de género en las respuestas para el acceso a derechos básicos de mujeres, lesbianas, travestis y trans, especialmente de grupos de mujeres migrantes y de pueblos originarios de Tucumán y de Jujuy al norte de Argentina.
Empowering Women for Excellence Initiative was able to provide legal counsel to our project partner to target community members, including primary and secondary beneficiaries on domestic violence cases during the COVID-19 lockdown.
We support more than 500 women who use drugs and sex work in response to the COVID-19 outbreak.
In March and April 2020 alone, Women for Women Basan provided 285 counseling sessions by telephone to survivors of violence.
Solidarity.
Solidarité.
Transformación.
Transformative.
Redes.
Family.
Sisterhood.
Loyal.
Resilience.
As a women's rights organization that works with women and girls, the kind of relationship that we want to build with both women and girls is that of trust.
Trust.
Trust. Trust.
I am inspired, energized, and humbled when I see the results of activists who are transforming the needs of women and girl survivors into action, and at the same time dealing with this pandemic themselves. They are proving resilient, but clearly there is an urgent need for financial and advocacy support. We will hear from more of them a bit later, but now back to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Zara. It was fantastic to see some of my colleagues and other trust fund grantees in the previous video speaking with one voice. Now, to open our program, we are honored to have with us the United Nations Secretary General, António Guterres. Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Excellencies, dear friends, I am pleased to join you on this important day for the United Nations and for the world. Violence against women and girls is a pervasive global human rights challenge rooted in unequal gender power relations, structural inequality, and discrimination. That is why we launched the global Unite to End Violence Against Women campaign. The COVID-19 crisis has further exposed violence against women and girls as a global emergency requiring urgent action. Rates of violence, in particular domestic violence, have dramatically escalated around the world. It is clear that the pandemic has exacerbated risk factors and laid bare the shortcomings of previous efforts to prevent and respond to this shocking emergency. In April this year, I urged the international community to end the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence once and for all, and make prevention and redress of violence a key part of national responses to COVID-19. And my appeal was answered with strong commitment and support from 146 member states and observers. I reiterated and relaunched that appeal several times. I do it again today. I've been heartened to see so many governments taking action to address gender-based violence during COVID-19. And today we will hear from member states about just some of these promising practices, ranging from funding and support for critical services and innovative justice sector responses, to awareness campaigns that challenge harmful gender stereotypes and norms. Efforts to date have not only involved states, civil society partners and grassroots women's rights organizations have been indispensable in preventing and responding to violence against women and girls in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Generation Equality Forum and its action coalitions, led by diverse and interdisciplinary leadership teams, We'll work to deliver concrete and transformative change across 6 critical themes, including an action coalition specifically targeting gender-based violence. This year, the United Nations flagship Spotlight Initiative, in partnership with the European Union, has expanded to 3 new sub-regions, investing in prevention and transformative sustainable solutions aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. However, much work remains to be done. Millions of women are pushed further into poverty by the COVID-19 crisis, and all forms of violence against them are rising. In this context, the global community must continue to build on the momentum we have created to prioritize the voices, experiences, and needs of women and girls. We must take into account the needs of women who experience violence, particularly those who face multiple and intersecting forms of violence and discrimination. This means emerging from this crisis with women's leadership front and center in constructing the solutions we need. Our priorities must first and foremost include urgent and flexible funding for women's rights organizations, and so often access first responders during crisis. It is critical that services for survivors are regarded as essential and remain open, with adequate resources and measures in place to support health and social services to care for survivors of violence. Programming should also prioritize the quality and continuity of police and justice sector responses. But measures should not only focus on intervening when violence has occurred. They should aim to reduce the risk of violence occurring in the first place. This includes providing financial and material support to women and households, encouraging positive messaging around gender equality, stereotypes and norms, supporting access to mental health services, and engaging key stakeholders, including women and girls, men and boys, and traditional and faith-based leaders. The more we know about the gender-based violence, the more we can effectively address it. For these reasons, measures should also focus on supporting institutions to collect and analyze data where it is safe and ethical to do so. We have already made much progress in highlighting violence against women and girls as one of the most pressing issues of our time. But we must go further, much further. Violence against women and girls is a horrible and widespread affront to their human rights and a blight on all our societies. Let us all unite to end the violence during COVID-19 and beyond, and I thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Mr. Secretary General. Thank you for your remarks, your leadership on this issue, and for the call to action that you sent to all governments to act in order to address the issue of violence against women and girls during the COVID-19 pandemic. Over 146 nations have answered your call, and during our program, we're going to be hearing from some of them. But first, let's hear from the Executive Director of UN Women, the agency that champions gender equality, works to create a world in which every woman and girl can exercise all of their human rights and live up to their full potential. I am so delighted to introduce the Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo Nguka.
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies we have been identified the basin amidst the unprecedented challenges of COVID-19 program, the progress for women and girls, a close connection between the pandemic and the rise in reported violence against women and girls. And we pandemic is the closest thing you can compare with gender-based pandemic. To the except that gender-based violence is a crisis that only women and girls experience in all their diversity. It brings fear to them. They fight against it every day, all over the world, and in many times, all by themselves. We know that nations know how to fight a pandemic. We have seen their impressive efforts in the fight against COVID-19. We've seen the difference between the way our public service responds to communities who present with a life-threatening illnesses like COVID-19, and those who come in threatening. This movement is reminded on the intersecting spirits, design state the violence and respond. Seeing the solidarity, we are carrying on. The second has been a key part of COVID-19, and this is important and for all countries. We are asking for change and save women. We must enhance women's rights of strengthen and to exercise women's respect plan. The just must and help to step it up and prevent the through mobilization and social mobilization on civil society data to inform our policies, programs, and civil society fully, and they need their support even more generous. The UN Trust Fund against women and partnership with states, the spotlight, and have allocated $8.7 million to 132 organizations around $11 million coming in the next 6 months. And we thank the OCHA fighting gender-based humanitarian settings. As I close, to call upon all of us to work with Generation Equality, a multi-stakeholder forum that would ensure that we can mobilize everyone on deck, sure the scans against women in the world.
Thank you, Madam Executive Director, and I hope everyone was able to hear that. Zara and I are looking forward to speaking with you, at least very shortly. But first, we're going to hear from two of the leaders who have responded to the Secretary General's call to action, Georgia and Morocco.
Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, COVID-19 has posed numerous challenges to our countries and to our societies. I would like to express my appreciation towards the Secretary General who, amid the crisis, made a special call for peace in the home, reminding us that domestic violence and violence against women and girls required special attention, especially during this pandemic. Gender-based violence against women and girls has been a global plague for centuries. But the humankind recognized it as a form of discrimination and violation of human rights only a few decades ago. Since then, we are struggling to find the cure. By now, we know that gender-based violence derives from gender inequality and harmful stereotypes. The global community has agreed that though response to violence requires a strong reaction, prevention is equally important for eliminating aggressive behaviors towards women and girls. These efforts demand investments. During the pandemic, incorporation of prevention and response considerations in the fiscal care or stimulus packages became vital. Solidarity and partnerships at global, regional, or local levels are the only way towards overcoming the crisis, with particular attention to combating violence against women and girls, especially at home. Prevention and response to domestic violence remains a priority for Georgia. We made sure that despite COVID-19 situation, there was no interruption in the provision of state-supported services, shelters, crisis centers, hotlines. Strong messages were sent by the government to all women and girls to seek help and reach out to law enforcement and other support mechanisms in case of violence. We are especially proud that as of September 2020, Georgia has introduced electronic surveillance of high-risk perpetrators of violence against women. In conjunction with a restrictive order, this mechanism allows for real-time monitoring of the perpetrator and restricting proximity to the victim and the victim's home, workplace, or other areas. Georgia joins Global 16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence and UN Secretary General's efforts to unite to end violence against women by 2030 campaigns. Women and girls who face gender-based violence should not be left behind when we know that there are countless women and girls suffering, many in complete silence as we speak. Even one is too many.
السيد الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، السيدة المديرة التنفيذية لهيئة الأمم المتحدة للمرأة، حضرات السيدات والسادة، إن احتفالنا هذه السنة باليوم العالمي لمناهضة العنف ضد النساء له صبغة خاصة نظراً للظرفية الاستثنائية التي فرضتها جائحة كوفيد-19 وما سببته من تنامي أشكال العنف ضد النساء عبر العالم داخل الوسط الأسري وخارجه. لذلك يعد تخليد هذا اليوم العالمي مناسبة للتحسيس بخطورة ظاهرة العنف ضد النساء باعتبارها إحدى أبشع صور انتهاكات حقوق الإنسان. والثابت اليوم اجتماعيا وأخلاقيا هو رفض هذه الظاهرة، كما لا يمكن أن تشكل الأزمة الصحية الحالية ذريعة لانتشارها أو التغاضي عن خطورتها. إن المغرب تحت القيادة الحكيمة لجلالة الملك محمد السادس نصره الله جعل من مناهضة العنف ضد النساء أولوية كبرى، كما شكل الدستور المغربي الذي صدر سنة 2011 منعطفا أساسيا بترسيخه لقيم المساواة بين الجنسين وتجريمه صراحة لكل أشكال التمييز والمعاملة اللا إنسانية أو الحاطة للكرامة. وقد جرم القانون المتعلق بمحاربة العنف ضد النساء جميع أشكال العنف، وأحدث آلية فعالة للتكفل بالنساء ضحايا العنف تعززت بإنشاء اللجنة الوطنية للتكفل بالنساء ضحايا العنف في سبتمبر 2019 لضمان التنسيق بين مختلف الجهات الحكومية وغير الحكومية المتدخلة وطنيا وترابيا. ولم يدخر المغرب جهدا لتطوير سياساته لمواصلة التأثير السلبي لجائحة كوفيد-19 على النساء وقاية وحماية وتكفلا، فقد أحدث 63 مركزا للتكفل بالنساء ضحايا العنف خلال الحجر الصحي، والآن يفعل عشرات الفضاءات متعددة الوظائف، كما أطلقت منصة رقمية في يناير 2020 لمواكبة النساء والفتيات في وضعية هشاشة. وبتوقيع إعلان مراكش لمناهضة العنف ضد النساء بتاريخ 8 مارس 2020 تحت الرعاية الفعلية لصاحبة السمو الملكي الأميرة لالا مريم، تعززت الدينامية القائمة بتوحيد جهود جميع المؤسسات الوطنية المعنية. ويشرفني أن أعلن قرب الانتهاء من وضع بروتوكول لوقاية النساء ضحايا العنف والتكفل بهن واستراتيجية وطنية جديدة لمناهضة العنف ضد النساء 2021-2030 بتشاور مع الشركاء الوطنيين مركزيا وترابيا. شكرا لإصغائكم.
As quoted by Georgia, even one is too many. Powerful words. It is really encouraging to hear about some of the actions taken so far to address violence against women and girls during the COVID pandemic. Of course, there is still a lot, and let me emphasize, a lot to be done. But it is important to see that some progress has already been made. Our next speaker is the head of the other co-hosting agency of today's event, the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA. UNFPA is the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency. Its mission is to deliver a world where every pregnancy is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. Welcome to the Under Secretary General and Executive Director of UNFPA, Natalia Kanem.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Stuart. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished participants, and dear friends, enough. That is what we must unite to say today and every day to all forms of violence against women and girls. Enough to domestic violence. Enough to rape. Enough to trafficking and sexual slavery. Enough to harmful practices like female genital mutilation and child marriage, and enough to impunity for one of the most flagrant and pervasive crimes and violations of human rights. There can be no peace in the world without peace in the home, and no peace in the home without justice. Enough to assumptions that violence is permissible or about to go away on its own. Enough to treating violence as anything less than a full-scale crisis that we must do everything within our power to stop. COVID-19 reveals painfully but instructively all of the ways that we need to think and act differently. Saying enough to violence is at the top of the list. This starts with recognizing how pervasive violence is and that it occurs in all societies, and disrupting the factors that feed it. UNFPA is working with partners in more than 150 locations to end gender-based violence and to support those affected, including through the European Union's Spotlight Initiative, the world's largest targeted effort to end all forms of violence against women and girls. Through our humanitarian leadership in this area, UNFPA reached 2.8 million people in this year in 47 countries, including at 800 women-friendly, safe spaces and 1,430 health facilities that are providing GBV services, such as the clinical management of rape. Reliable, comparable data on violence against women is essential for prevention and response efforts. And with that in mind, UNFPA is releasing its first geospatial intimate partner violence IPV dashboard, including data for 119 countries covering all regions of the world. While when disaggregated by age, the data reveal that young women are at the highest risk of intimate partner violence. In 11 of the 14 Spotlight Initiative countries with data by age, the highest rates were among women under age 34, and particularly young women in their 20s. Young women and girls must be empowered so that they can claim their right to live free of harm, and the voices of men and boys need to be heard so that they become allies as we work shoulder to shoulder to build a more gender equal world. We can and we must do better. It is time for all of us to stand up and say enough to violence, not just on one day, but 365 days of the year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Executive Director, for your remarks. To any of my fellow poets in the audience, I know that many of us were clicking our fingers along to the words of Madam Executive Director. I would now like to just pause for a moment and thank the Secretary General of the United Nations for his earlier remarks and his participation today. Unfortunately, he needs to leave the event due to his schedule and commitments. Thank you again, Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you very much. All the best.
Stuart and I are delighted to now have a bit of time and an opportunity for a short discussion with you and UN Women's Executive Director. We each have a question for you, and I'd like to start off my question to you, Executive Director of UNFPA. We have seen how 2020 has taught us that everyone deserves a seat at the table. However, young people, especially adolescent young girls, are inherently left behind. This is vital to push forth for an inclusive agenda for generation equality. How is the UN system responding to the particular needs of young women and girls, especially those being left behind and those most vulnerable and marginalized?
Putting youth at the center of our coordinated efforts to tackle gender-based violence, to tackle COVID, to tackle human problems is essential. It's young people, especially those who are in low-income and developing countries, who are disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And they're also understandably concerned about the future. And climate change, of course, is one of the things that they have been active on. The UNFPA sounded the alarm early about at the onset of COVID regarding the disproportionate and the devastating impact the pandemic could have on those who are most vulnerable and marginalized. And young women and girls are chief among the concern. And the data is bearing this out. Many predictions, for example, in Kenya, that during a 3-month lockdown, there would be an increase in pregnancy among teenage girls. They've seen 152,000 new teen pregnancies in that country, and that's a 40% increase of what had been there before. And on today, as we're discussing gender-based violence, the foremost harmful practices include child marriage, not to mention female genital mutilation. And as girls are home during the pandemic, not attending school, sadly, a lot of the progress that we had seen moving forward is now threatened. So we have adjusted to commit to making sure that young people see themselves not just as partners, but actually as leaders around the table. Generation equality is an example of that. And we are working with young leaders straight across the UN to mobilize youth themselves, but also to campaign so that teachers and parents and all the supportive systems around young people, their friends and families and communities, see them as allies. The campaign is featuring young people who are sharing their views in Youth Against COVID-19 social media. And it's been very interesting to see the creativity, the passion, but also how smart young people are about what creates change. We see this in the real world, and we see this in endeavors in partnership with the UN and others. So I believe that despite the challenges, COVID-19 has only sharpened our focus. For me, it's renewed my commitment to put young people first. I also think that when we look at health, when we think about who is in need of not being left behind, who needs to be made visible by data and evidence, young people are really good at doing this kind of communication and inventorying what's going on in their communities. So within the UN system as a whole, we now have the means, we have the partnerships, increasingly we have the momentum to safeguard these rights of women and girls and young people in general, and we're determined to do that. Of course we need support, of course we need funding, but young people are determined to keep their voices and perspectives at the core of these efforts, and that's what it's going to mean to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Executive Director. Your answer totally blew me away. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you, Zara. Now, my question is directed towards the Executive Director of UN Women. Now, as we've heard already, this year marks a milestone moment for accelerating implementation of global commitments to gender equality. 2020 marks the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, a visionary agenda for women's rights and empowerment. And this anniversary, of course, represents a great moment for global mobilization. The Generation Equality Forum, convened by UN Women and co-hosted by the governments of Mexico and France, which, of course, during COVID is being rescheduled for next year, could be a... Now, this forum is planned as centered, multi-stakeholder global gathering for gender equality that will bring together the power of activism, limited solidarity, and youth leadership to achieve transformative change. The forum has been designed along 6 thematic action coalitions, one of them, which is gender-based violence. These action coalitions are global, innovative partnerships with governments, civil society, international organizations, and the private sector. Their aim is to catalyze collective action, drive increased public and private investment, and deliver game-changing results. More young people all over the world are speaking up against violence against women and girls, many of whom are from the new generation, my generation. And so many men and boys also believe in this equality and want it. So what do you see as the greatest value of the Generation Equality Forum and Action Coalition on gender-based violence in terms of leveraging and accelerating global efforts to end violence against women and girls?
Thank you very much. The biggest advantage of generation equality is the diversity that is within generation equality, because violence against women occurs everywhere. It occurs at the workplace, it occurs in churches, it occurs in families, it occurs in the streets, and the diversity of the members of generation equality ensures us to cover all these areas. It is also unusual for all these stakeholders to work together and focus on ending violence against women. It is also important that it will bring together strategies that are applicable in the unique spaces that the different stakeholders work, but also strategies that can be shared by these diverse groupings. It is also meant to catalyze investment because, as you know, we just don't have adequate resources to respond to the scourge of gender-based violence at the level at which we need to respond. It also enables us for all of these actors to be voice, ears, and eyes wherever they are, and they will be able to speak about violence against women and act as they see fit. It is a moment in generation equality that all these stakeholders jump together, that they do something together, and they attack the scourge of violence against women and girls as one force, not as a fragmented force. It brings together also the United Nations family in all its diversity. And of course, it also brings women and girls in their own right who have a large stake in this process.
Thank you so much, Madam Executive Director. Zara, back to you.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you both so much. It is exciting to share that we have partners from the world of business too. With the support of Mullen Lowe New York and Media Hub New York, UN Women is running an ad campaign to cast a spotlight on some of the urgent legal gaps that must close to end violence against women and girls. The ads will run across billboards and digital media in the US, UK, and more. These powerful images shown were created from everyday life scenes of non-violent nature for illustrated purposes only, and were not produced from any images of any actual individuals experience violence in any form. To stay on the point about partnerships, the ongoing partnership is a game-changing one for a safer world for women and girls. In 2017, the European Union and the United Nations embarked on a new global multi-year partnership focused on eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls. Launched with a seed funding commitment of 500 million euros from the European Union, the Spotlight Initiative represents an unprecedented global effort to invest in the work to end violence against women and girls as a precondition and driver for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I am so pleased to introduce to you Ms. Jutta Urpilainen, European Union Commissioner for International Partnerships.
Violence against women and girls is one of the most widespread violations of human rights. This year, with the pandemic, we have seen big rise in domestic violence across the globe. We will not accept this. This week, we are adopting an ambitious new action plan to promote gender equality in external relations. We are setting out a plan for a world where women and girls have a voice and fully enjoy their human rights. To accomplish this, we need a holistic, multilateral response to end this violence everywhere. The European Commission has been leading the global response in partnership with the United Nations. EU-UN Spotlight Initiative is already active in more than 25 countries across Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, and the Pacific. With Spotlight, we are providing critical funding to support victims, to ensure safety of all, and to deliver frontline services. Positive change is possible, and it is necessary to recover from the pandemic. You can count on the EU's support to build a gender-equal world together.
As we all know, our world has changed.
Every single one of us has a role to play in the work and efforts to prevent and end violence against women and girls. We all can and must use our voice to call for change. Our next guest is no stranger to global accomplishment. International superstar and UN Goodwill Ambassador Nicole Kidman has been a staunch advocate for ending violence against women and girls for years, using her celebrity platform and her voice to raise awareness about this issue. And here she is.
As we all know, our world has changed. Over the past few months, we've seen deep inequality surface, but we've also seen opportunities to build and change things for the better. One of the lessons we've learnt from the pandemic is that the home is not a safe place for so many women and so many girls who are subject to domestic violence. But as many countries open up after COVID-19, we do have a chance to create a new normal, a future without violence against women. Even before the pandemic, the numbers were staggering. 1 in 3 women would face gender-based violence in her lifetime. 1 in 3. As UN Women's Goodwill Ambassador, I have traveled the world and I've had a chance to hear from many survivors of violence. Their stories have been excruciatingly painful at times, heartbreaking, and horrifying. But the women themselves would remind us and me that this is a problem with a solution. But the solution can only exist if we provide help. So that's what I'm doing today. I am trying to create awareness and build more awareness. UN Women works at many different levels to prevent and address violence against women. They support organizations that provide survivors essential services. Services such as shelter, healthcare, access to justice, access to care, and access to the law. They also work to accelerate legal reforms, which is so needed. And we are always working to increase the awareness on this issue. And that's what we're asking you to do. So, to play your role in ending violence against women, we need you to learn about the issue, make your friends and your community aware of services and resources, ensure that you know who to call if someone was in danger, volunteer your time if you can, or if you have the means, donate. Donate at unwomen.org. So thank you for listening to me today, and anything you can do to help is greatly appreciated by all of us. Thank you.
As your fellow Australian neighbour, thank you, Nicole Kidman. In the summer of 1992, in a besieged Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a group of musicians got together to create music. Their music was, and it is still today, used to promote human rights, peace and gender equality. For our event today, they send us a message of support through their singing. Their ensemble is so fittingly, but completely coincidental. Ensemble Corona. In this new COVID world, they still found a safe way to create together a special performance just for us today. The song is called Naranja, meaning orange, for the brighter future, free from violence against women and girls. Coming to us from Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the ensemble Corona.
Thank you very much for that lovely performance and for finding a moment to create and share your music with us in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. We are thrilled to have another global leader with us today, recognizing the significance of the challenge of addressing gender-based violence. The World Bank is committed to addressing gender-based violence through investment, research, learning, and close collaboration with stakeholders around the world. I am delighted to introduce the president of the World Bank Group, Mr. David Malpass.
Gender-based violence affects 1 in 3 women in her lifetime in developing and developed countries alike. The pandemic has made the problem worse, with increasing reports of violence against women. Violence against women is unacceptable. The World Bank is committed to working at ending this scourge by speaking out and providing analysis and financing for our client countries to address it. We are also committed to mitigating and preventing risks of gender-based violence in the projects we finance. We have policies, standards, and practices in place to do this. I'm pleased to announce today that we are raising the bar and consequences for contractors that fail to comply with their obligations on gender-based violence through a new disqualification mechanism. Starting January 1st, 2021, contractors and subcontractors who do not comply with requirements to address sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment will be disqualified from receiving future bank finance contracts for a period of 2 years and until they have implemented remedies. This is the latest measure under the action plan we adopted in response to the recommendations of the July 2017 Gender-Based Violence Task Force report, which sought to mitigate and prevent risk of sexual exploitation and abuse in the projects we support. We encourage our development partners to join us in this initiative and are pleased to work with the UN in its efforts to eliminate all forms of violence against women.
Thank you to Mr. Morpath and the World Bank for all the work and for making such a difference. Now let's hear from 2 more member states about their work during the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria and Trinidad and Tobago have also responded to the call from the Secretary General.
COVID-19 took the world by surprise. And here in Nigeria, we had our fair share. Within the pandemic, we had another pandemic, and that is rape and gender-based violence, which has escalated beyond proportion. Government at all levels showed full political will. Mr. President came out and made a statement condemning rape and gender-based violence. The Vice President, the wife of the President, all our governors declared states of emergency in their states after our conversation. Why so? All our governors formed a coalition to fight gender-based violence in their various states. My ministry is fully committed and is calling on all well-meaning Nigerians and men and women of goodwill to say no to all forms of violence against women and our children. I commend the statement of the UN Secretary General, where he appealed for peace in our homes. Our women and our children don't deserve to be molested in the confines of their homes. All hands must be on deck. We must together fight this scourge. I say no to gender-based violence. I say no to rape. Together, we can fight this scourge. God bless you.
Colleagues, good morning. As we commemorate the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, Trinidad and Tobago stands in solidarity with the UN Women's Unite by 2030 campaign under the theme, Orange the World, Fund, Respond, Prevent, Collect. COVID-19 has the potential to delay gender equality. In putting people first, nurturing our greatest assets, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is committed to the goal of gender equality by 2030 and the elimination of all forms of family violence and discrimination, particularly those perpetrated against women and children. These are a few tangible actions taken to address violence against women and girls in the context of COVID-19. government is escalating the implementation of its policy measures contained in its National Policy on Gender and Development. In April 2020, the amendments to the Domestic Violence Act was expedited to provide further protection for women and children affected by domestic violence and other forms of family violence. The government is escalating the opportunities for women to participate in the productive sectors through capacity building, financial support, and networking. The recent launch of She Trades Hub and the offer of COVID-19 social assistance, such as the Salary Relief Grant and rental assistance, are just examples of such commitment to reducing women's economic and social vulnerability. Gender mainstreaming continues in the public and private sector and is now being scaled up in selected communities to remove negative stereotypes surrounding women and children and reduce all forms of family violence, which affects women and girls disproportionately. The government operationalized 2 custom-designed domestic violence shelters in May 2020 and will add 3 additional facilities to this stock shortly. To support the 24-hour National Domestic Violence Hotline, we have added a gender-based violence unit to the police service to provide greater support and protection to women and children who are victims of abuse. Colleagues, as leaders rewriting the script of our history, let us recommit to our collective responsibility to secure the rights of women and girls to live a life free of all forms of violence. I thank you.
It is so encouraging to see government leaders championing this cause and responding to the Secretary-General's call. Now, 2 survivors, 2 remarkable women from 2 different parts of the world, both with 2 different personal stories that have touched so many people everywhere. Both of them have their own stories and messages to share with us today. First, in conversation with Stuart, here is Nobel Peace Prize nominee, force behind the Sexual Rights Act in the United States, and founder of RISE, Amanda Nguyen.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about your work and your organization?
Hope is a renewable resource, and that's really the center philosophy of RISE. The world is going through a very difficult time right now, and you might feel scared. I know what it feels like to feel scared. After my rape, I felt despair, but I also felt this fire, like so many survivors, rape survivors do when they meet a broken criminal justice system. I still remember walking out after my rape kit examination, and I'd never more fully understood the definition of lonely than at that moment. And that's also one of the moments when I realized that my story was not my own, that there are so many people in the world who are rape survivors, and that's why I decided to pen my own civil rights into existence after finding that the criminal justice system is so broken. I started an organization called RISE, and together we organized and passed the Sexual Assault Survivor Bill of Rights, which President Obama signed in 2016. It gives civil rights to over 25 million rape survivors in the United States. And since then, we've passed over 32 laws covering over 84 million rape survivors.
I was just wondering, looking at the current situation with COVID, has that changed the landscape for this issue and for your work in particular?
Just as we've seen in the wake of so many other disasters, crises, whether it be war or natural disasters, the spread of COVID-19 is being trailed by a surge of sexual violence. So RISE has been fighting this with our Survivor Safe Haven program. It's modeled off of similar initiatives we've seen in France and Argentina and what we've done is we've partnered with businesses around the United States to provide safe havens, safe places for survivors of sexual violence to come and get resources, call the hotline. This program is now serving a little over 35 million people, and we're going to keep on spreading it.
Why do you feel that it's important that global leaders in the UN prioritize this issue of violence against women and girls and the rights of survivors?
What we want is for people just to see us. The most important thing that I want people to take away is that the people who have the solutions to the world's most pressing problems are the people who live that problem every day. So I urge world leaders to include survivors' voices to the table. You know, I think there's a saying that if you're not at the table, you're what's being served on the menu. And so even if we aren't going to be invited to the table, which thank you so much for including my voice today, we're going to pull up a folding chair. You're going to sit down. But also, I just want to say that no one is powerless when we come together, and no one is invisible when we demand to be seen. So thank you so much for seeing me today.
Thank you so much. I could have spoken with Amanda for considerably longer than our time allowed. She's an incredibly driven activist and has accomplished so much for so many in need. But now we're going to hear from another survivor and a global leader. Originally from Iraq, this Yazidi woman survived an ISIS kidnapping and is now a human rights activist who tirelessly advocates against human trafficking. You all know her as a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, and coming to us from Germany, please welcome Nadia Murad.
It is my honor to speak before you to commemorate the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Sexual violence was systematically used by ISIS as a weapon of war to tear apart and eradicate the Yazidi community. This story is shared by communities across the globe, especially those who have been displaced from their homes. For refugees and IDPs, violence against women is often compounded by intersecting vulnerabilities. While escaping conflicts, women are trafficked into sexual slavery or end up in displacement camps, where unsafe living conditions increase the instances of violence against them. In the Yazidi community alone, 2,800 women and children remain in captivity. Many women who have returned from captivity live in IDP camps, where recovery resources are scarce. Even those who have returned to their homes face obstacles to recovery due to the lack of basic services. We must act proactively and not reactively, making sure we prevent the violence from happening in the first place. Sadly, this is often not the case in many conflict areas around the world. When we fail to prevent atrocities, we must then provide tangible support to survivors and end the impunity of perpetrators, to signal that violence against women is a crime that undermines the dignity and rights of all people. We know the solutions. Now is the time to enact them. Now is the time to listen to survivors and invest in women. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadia. You are such an inspiration to us and to everyone listening that I know. The work of Amanda, Nadia, civil society leaders, women human rights defenders, activists and advocates on the ground is crucial in our ongoing effort to prevent and end violence against women and girls. I too am a victim of gender-based violence, and I feel the invisible bond between us strengthen as I hear these powerful words. And here is another example of an organization doing such work, working every day to support women and girls, before and now during the pandemic. Let's take a look at grantee of the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, the Stars of Hope Society, which serves women with all types of disabilities in Palestine.
Stars of Hope Society for the empowerment of women with disabilities has surveyed 650 women with disabilities to assess their needs and situation during the COVID-19 crisis and provided medical supplies to 200 women with disabilities in the West Bank and Gaza.
Stars of Hope Society is one of 150 projects currently funded by the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women in 71 countries and territories. With projects aimed at preventing and ending violence against women and girls, their grantees have reached over 22 million individuals over the course of the last 4 years alone. From Palestine, we now go to Thailand to hear from another transformational woman who has just been named by the BBC as one of the 100 most inspiring and influential women of 2020. Actress, supermodel, women's rights activist, and UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, Cindy Bishop.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be with all of you today as we shine the light on an issue that touches upon 1 in 3 women globally. In 2018, I came across a headline in the local paper in which authorities were warning women not to dress sexily so as to avoid sexual assault during the upcoming water festival in Thailand. This was issued as a measure to prevent sexual abuse, as many Thai women report being groped or harassed at the annual festival. After reading that, it just struck a chord with me, and I got so angry that women were being warned to dress appropriately, yet men were not being told to act appropriately. And so I posted a video saying that women have a right to dress however they feel so long as it's not illegal. Sexual assault and harassment are never a woman's fault. Men should keep their hands to themselves. Well, the video went viral, and that was the beginning of the Don't Tell Me How to Dress campaign. I believe the video went viral not because of my celebrity influence, but because so many Thai women all over the country were just as frustrated as I was. And so I decided to take it further and teamed up with UN Women in order to break the cycle of victim blaming and dispel the myths and stereotypes associated with sexual assault. I wanted to spotlight the outfits worn by survivors at the time of their assault. I believe that showcasing these clothes, ranging from ordinary work clothes to school uniforms, we could challenge the notion that a woman's appearance and behavior are to blame. Clearly, it's not about the clothes. Unequal power and attitudes are what drive violence against women. Listening to the stories of survivors of violence and service providers, I learned how important it is to have survivor-centered services in order to support the women through their healing and legal journey. This has become even more important during the COVID-19 pandemic. We all know that even before the pandemic, home was not a safe place for many women, with billions initially sheltering at home and many women being trapped with abusive partners. Reporting of violence against women increased globally. Women and girls found themselves isolated. Many of them could not get help or make phone calls to health clinics, hotlines, or the police. The pandemic has revealed existing gaps and structural issues that need to be addressed to ensure that women can live a life free from violence. We have seen that the essential services support was not equipped to handle the influx of cases. We have seen the need to build systems and strengthen services for women, to invest in their expansion, and to equip providers with knowledge and technology needed to support women and girls during emergencies. Today, we have a chance to build back better and create a new normal. I would like to urge you to declare women's services as essential services during emergencies. Ensure that minimum essential services are funded and maintained. Provide sustainable funding for women's rights organizations, shelters, crisis centers, and other services, as some services have had to close down due to lack of funding and support, and ensure that women know about the availability of these services. Let's change the ways in which women are supported. Let's use this opportunity to prevent and end violence against women today and every day. Thank you.
Coming out of COVID and creating a new normal is the goal. Thank you, Cindy. We've heard from Goodwill Ambassador Cindy Bishop and Nicole Kidman. And there are many other UN Goodwill Ambassadors around the world who are using their celebrity platform to spread the word. Here's an example of what the Goodwill Ambassadors from the Arab States region are doing.
الو
ازيك؟ بقول لك ايه، انت شفتي الفيلم؟
فيلم ايه؟
اي ما عجبنيش جملة فرجت فيه البارح ورعبني ورعب الاولاد وما حبوش يخرجوا من بيوتهم.
مش فاهمة شنو تقصد؟
الفيلم اللي قلتي لي اقول لك عليه لما اشوفه. ما احنا عشان قاعدين في البيت الافلام كترت قوي.
انت كويسة؟
لا خالص، من امبارح بيجيلي كوابيس ولسه هيجي تاني كمان شوية على التلفزيون ومش عايزة اتفرج عليه.
طب عايزاني اكلم خط المساعدة؟
ماشي، بس الحقي افتحي التلفزيون قبل ما يجي.
تمام، ما تخافيش. مؤخرا كنا بنطلب من ناس كتيرة ان هي تقعد في البيت علشان ده الأأمن ليهم، لكن للأسف لناس كتيرة البيت كان بيحطهم في خطر أكبر.
الأوبئة الصحية بتأثر على الجميع، رجال ونساء، ولكن النساء وخصوصاً الريفيات بيتحملوا العبء الأكبر من انعدام الأمن الغذائي، سوء التغذية والأعمال المنزلية.
فترات الحجر المنزلي الطويلة والخوف المستمر من العدوى وانعدام سبل العيش والفقر وانعدام الأمن الغذائي تسببوا في ارتفاع حاد في حالات العنف الأسري في العالم كله وأيضاً في منطقتنا.
البنات والستات بتواجه أشكال كتير من العنف، زي العنف الجسدي، العنف الجنسي، ختان الإناث وزواج الأطفال.
بنات وستات كتيرة اللي بيتعرضوا للعنف ما عندهمش أي وسيلة إن هم يطالبوا بالدعم أو المساعدة أو حتى يبلغوا عن العنف.
Governments and civil society must reach women in distress and provide them with safe spaces and social safety nets. We, as a global community, need to do better.
واجبنا كلنا إن احنا نعرف تفاصيل الخدمات المحلية اللي تقدر تساعد أي شخص متعرض لعنف ومحتاج لمساعدة.
هناك خط مساعدة وهناك ملاجئ. اعرفوا عن القضية أكثر وخليكم في أمان.
العنف بكل معانيه ضد أي امرأة أو ست أو بنت انتهاك لحقوق الإنسان. احنا معاكي.
احنا معاكي، ما تخافيش.
ما تخافيش، احنا معاكي.
A powerful, creative example of advocacy. Our last group of government leaders also have messages to share about their work and commitments to end violence against women and girls. Let's hear from Malawi and Australia.
I am honored to be part of the official commemoration of the International Day of Eliminating Violence Against Women. In Malawi, we developed a response plan with humanitarian sector clusters as entry points. And then we conducted rapid gender assessment that revealed major gender issues. So thank you for noticing our efforts to deal with gender-based violence, especially amidst the social and economic disruptions occasioned by COVID-19 pandemic. Allow me to highlight some of the issues that embody this blight of violence against women that we are eager to remove from our society. Firstly, we seek to address the issue of undue work burden for women and girls through unpaid domestic work, such as collecting water and firewood, as well as caring for the sick and the elderly and the orphaned. Second of all, we seek to address the issue of limited access for many women and girls in rural areas to gender-based violence response services. And finally, we seek to address the exacerbation of child marriages and pregnancies in the face of such COVID-19 preventative restrictions as the closure of schools. Chairperson, may I therefore appeal for support in the form of resources and knowledge of best practices from all our partners. Thank you for your attention.
Reducing violence against women and girls in Australia, in our region, and globally is a priority. And today, on International Day for the Elimination of Violence against Women, Australia joins with others in condemning and restating our commitment to eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls. We have seen evidence that domestic and family violence have increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is true for Australia and for our neighbours. Even prior to the pandemic, our region had some of the highest rates of intimate partner violence in the world. The Secretary-General's April call for peace in the home was a reminder of the need for urgent action. Addressing the serious issue of gender-based violence is a pillar of Australia's COVID-19 response. We are working in partnership with governments, the private sector, NGOs and local communities in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. In response to the impact of the pandemic here in Australia, the government has provided additional funding to support domestic, family and sexual violence services. This is in addition to our ongoing efforts under Australia's national plan to reduce violence against women and their children. A key focus of our efforts under the national plan is on primary prevention. As part of the Australian Government's investment under the Fourth Action Plan of the National Plan, we've allocated funding to prevention strategies focused on stopping violence before it begins. Through our worldwide efforts to fund, respond, prevent, collect, we can reverse this worrying COVID-19 trajectory of increased violence against women and girls. Australia joins you in showing our support and in making this a reality. Everyone has the right to feel safe, especially in their homes.
The international leaders and member states we've heard from so far are just an example of those that have responded to the Secretary-General's call to end violence against women and girls and to respond to its increase caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's take a look at what other member states are accomplishing around the world. As we heard so far, the Secretary General of the United Nations urged all governments to make the funding of civil society prevention, redress of violence, and collection of data a key part of national response plans for COVID-19. His appeal was answered in a statement by 146 member states and observers that expressed strong support. As we have heard and seen in the past 8 months, they have also made a progress in implementing very concrete steps to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls during the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, there is still a lot to be done.
In line with the Secretary General's call, member states' responses and the needs on the ground, which we heard about from civil society today, the UN system continues to be dedicated to ending violence against women and girls and stands ready to support all of these efforts. Here is a brief joint statement from a range of UN agency leaders in support of the UN-wide commitment.
Violence against women and girls is pervasive during normal times. It is a product of unequal gender power relations and discrimination against women and girls, which is exacerbated by conflict and humanitarian crisis, poverty, economic stress, and at times the harmful use of alcohol or other drugs.
Some of the measures to contain COVID-19, such as movement restrictions and staying at home, have increased exposure for those already in abusive relationships. It is imperative that practical steps be taken to ensure that survivors are safe and receive the support and services that they need now.
In solidarity with the UN Secretary General, we emphasize 6 critical areas for action. First, make urgent and flexible funding available for women's rights organizations and recognize their role as first responders.
Support health and social services to continue their duty of care to violence against women survivors and to remain accessible, especially to those most likely to be left behind. Ensure that service for survivors of violence are regarded as essential, remain open, and are resourced and made accessible, especially to those most likely to be left behind.
Place a high priority on police and justice responses. Put preventive measures in place. Collect data only if it is clear that it is needed, that it will be used to improve services and programs, and only if ethical and safety standards can be met.
As United Nations entities working to end violence against women and girls, we will continue to advocate for and support governments in the implementation of effective approaches to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls.
Promote funding to women's rights organizations working at the front lines through the UN Trust Fund to end violence against women. Work to ensure that COVID-19 response, mitigation and response plans integrate efforts to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls.
Continue to document and share innovative solutions for the unique challenges posed by COVID-19. During these challenging times, we must more than ever be vigilant and remain steadfast in our efforts to ensure a positive trajectory and avoid regression of significant progress towards the elimination of violence against women and girls.
I would like to thank the Secretary General and my fellow heads of agencies for making the prevention and response to violence against women and girls a top priority. Now, more than ever, we need joined up action to end violence against women and girls once and for all. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the shortcomings of previous efforts. 2020 represents an opportunity to mobilize everyone in support of concerted and concrete actions for change. The Generation Equality Forum, which takes place 25 years after the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, is a collective feminist agenda setting and mobilization moment for urgent action and accountability on violence against women and girls and other forms of gender inequality. The 16 days of activism, which starts today, represents a key milestone on the journey to the Generation Equality Forum in Mexico and Paris in 2021. I count on you for your support to translate your commitment into action and resources to transform the lives of women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Executive Director. We are nearing the close of our program and a special global performance that I promise you won't want to miss out on. But first, I have to say that I'm so inspired by what I've seen here today and the extraordinary efforts of member states and the entire United Nations system.
I'm also grateful for these efforts, not only governments around the world and this institution, but by so many grassroots activists and my colleagues implementing this work around the world.
We've seen a lot of VIPs and heads of state and Goodwill Ambassadors and leaders from civil society today. Each and every one has made a commitment to making a difference for a better world. So to close our event today, here is the message from our current and former United Nations ambassadors who have got together virtually during COVID to share their ongoing commitment to heal the world.
There's a place in your heart, and I know that it is love. And this place could be much brighter than tomorrow.
And if you really try, you'll find there's no need to cry. In this place, you'll feel there's no hurt or sorrow. There are ways to get there if you care enough for the living. Make a little space, make a better place. Heal the world, make it a better place. For you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. We could fly so high, let our spirit never die. In our hearts, let us feel that all are brothers.
Create a world without fear. Together we cry happy tears. See the nations turn their souls into plowshares.
We could really get there if you care enough for the living. Make a little space, make a better place.
Heal the world, make it a better place. For you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me.
And the dream we were conceived in will reveal a joyful face. And the world we once believed in will shine again in grace. Then why do we keep strangling life when this earth crucifies its soul? Though it's plain to see this world is heavenly, be God's close.
Heal the world, make it a better place. For you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me. You and for you, the world we live in and for city for our children and for you, the world we live in. City
Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who made this possible. And the credits are about to begin.
Please continue to orange the world.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
She wakes up, she looks at chores in Hanoi, Natal, Ramallah. In Tangier, she takes a breath, lifts up her voice. Ilaho, La Paz, Kampala. Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we are one woman, you cry and I hear you. We are one woman, you hurt and I hurt too. We are one woman, your hopes are mine, and we shall shine. In Wallace, she speaks the truth. She reaches out, then teaches others how to. In Jaipur, she gives her name. She lives without shame. In Manila, Sultan, though we're different as can be, we're connected, she with me. We are one woman, your courage keeps me strong. We are one woman, you sing, I sing along. We are one woman, your dreams are mine, and we shall shine. We shall shine. And one man, he hears her voice. One man, he fights her fight. Day by day, he lets go the old ways. One woman at a time. Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say.